Hello, friends. Um, it's so funny to be talking about something like insight and relating it to patriarchy when there's this one way flow that puts a white male at the center. I'm sorry about that. It's a structural problem. And I'll take it a step further and say that I virtually always teach relationally, both my relating with you and also inviting you into subgroups. But Sangha Live has such a strong culture of the normal one way sage on a stage kind of, Dharma talk, dispensed wisdom, that I would be concerned. I am concerned that people would be like, I didn't come for this, and would just, would not get what might be useful for them because they don't want to be in a chat room with one other person or two other people, right? Uh, so I'm going to go with that flow. And as I'm speaking now, you can tell I'm already with you in this topic, because the things that we don't see affect us a lot. And meditation helps us to see more. But it can't work alone, right? It's a whole life path of effacement, a whole life path of erosion of the crusty, holding self. So, in part out of respect for Sangha Live's form, but also because there's wisdom in calming down first, I will join you in some time of silence. I'll provide some guidance, and I hope that it's helpful. Yeah. So even before we maybe do the, learned behavior of closing our eyes and, you know, stepping into whatever way of meditation is familiar to you, I'd like to just notice that here, in this very moment of being together, that my voice and your listening come together in this moment of contact, passant contact, and that here the mindfulness is already beginning to gather, beginning to use the power of relationship to amplify or to evoke awareness. So I'm talking about it. Words touch you. You think about it. You say, yeah, okay, I'll look at my mind. I'll look at my body. And that's our practice right now of remembering awareness. So you might just notice how it feels to be receiving these words, the mind states that are here. You might notice how it feels to be sitting, the feeling of the body sitting. And with a deep feeling of respect for the simplicity that comes when we close the eyes. If you're comfortable closing your eyes, I welcome that. Just because the visual channel is so much information. And you can turn all of that attention just towards the body here and now, feeling the body sitting, the whole of the body, this form, rupa, this form of the body. The body is being known. There's a head, it's a certain shape, certain angle on the neck. And all the little movements and tensions of muscles and the eyes and the cheeks and the mouth, the jaw. It just feels like this now, however it feels. Just a way of locating the moment. That's all. Locating the moment of the throat and the neck. The mass of the shoulders and arms and hands. There can be awareness of these things, just turning towards it. There's the body. Awareness of the torso, the upper chest and middle of the chest, the solar plexus and the belly, the groin, the entire back, upright torso. And knowing the torso, awareness of this form, and the hips, the legs, and the bend at the hips and the bend at the knees, and the ankles and the feet. All just by way of pointing to here and now. Where is this sense of here? Can you locate here? The whole of the body, can you locate a sense of now, this moment? The entire body mind. And what is this experience right now? What's the mind like? The quality of mind, the mood, the mind states. What's it like to hear this voice? What's it like to sit? What's it like to have a body? What's it like to be at the very front edge of your life, the tip of the moment of your entire life now? And to whatever extent you feel the pressures of mental habit, emotional habit, thoughts or feeling states, whatever, to whatever extent you feel that, then the knowing of that, the awareness of that, is still awareness. So don't worry about it. Just like the body, it's known. As the body mind comes home to the moment, do you notice that there's any calming? Calming of the body, calming of the mind. Not that looking for perfect calm, just is there a settling of some kind? And what's that feel like? What does that feel like if the body mind is a little more settled and a little more awake? What's that experience just now? What's it like when the mind is brighter and still calm? Not perfectly calm, it doesn't matter, but just a little calmer. What happens in your capacity to perceive, to observe experience? Check it out right now. And the moment, however it is, a body-mind experience right now, let's not try to give words to it. Let's just say, it's like this. It feels like this. It's experienced like this. What is that for you? The tone, the sense of this moment. So many factors for each of us condition this moment. What we ate for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. whatever's going on elsewhere in our lives with our loved ones or difficult people at work or in the large arc of our lives. This moment feels like this, conditioned by all of that. What's it like for you? What's this moment like? Is there tension? Is there ease? Sometimes clear, sometimes a little scattered, sometimes bright or joyful, sometimes dark. And there's awareness of however it is. Just notice your capacity to be aware, operating right now. Every moment of experience, conditioned by every prior moment, so you feel yourself at the tip of that flow of all that came before. Every moment conditioned by all prior moments. What's that like now? In this very moment, even when you're alone and in relative silence, all prior contacts, all prior relationships, all prior actions condition this instant of what life feels like. And it's like this, just like this. All of the indescribable threads of culture are conditioning this moment in your own mind and body right now. The culture is vibrating forward and it's experienced like this, just how you feel it now. No moment is exempt. Nothing is left out. Every instant is path. this intentional looking, this intentional awareness of body-mind is right now being supported by this voice and by your paying attention to it, the voice of another and wise attention, the Buddha called it. The necessary conditions for the practice of right view, of wisdom. This is a wisdom practice that you're engaged in right now, looking at things as they are, supported by the voice of another and wise attention. So what do you see? What do you experience? What do you know with awareness? What's known? This is what it's like being conscious in a body-mind, with all of those little feelings of the body that pop out at you, the neural networks producing more thought all by themselves. It's not you, it's just a functioning brain that's been conditioned. The feeling tone is like this, and there's awareness. As we come towards the end of this particular form of guided practice, let's take advantage of whatever stillness has been cultivated and notice whether that stillness, even a little bit more stillness than your usual lives, however it is, does it make it possible to see more clearly this experience here and now? In Buddhist terms, does the Samadhi help the sati? Does the concentration, some would say, but let's say stillness, support the mindfulness? The calm support the clear seeing? Check it out for yourself right now. In insight dialogue practice, that bell is actually usually experienced as an invitation to carry the mindfulness and the samadhi forward into relational contact. Ironically, ringing the bell at the end of a meditation session can also be like, okay, it's time to get normal and distracted again. So I invite us to curiosity about this moment, actually, and what we're doing here. That the thing itself is a practice. It's not just about practice. This is the voice of another, wise attention, the conditions for the arising of Samadhi, right view, right here. So this is the practice of right view. This is a wisdom practice, formally, specifically. Okay? So, just that's the sense of possibility. The reason I wanted to talk about insight and look a little bit at sati and samadhi, at mindfulness and stillness, as they empower insight, is both to perhaps enhance our respect for that power, and so be encouraged, and also to enhance our sense of that's not the whole path. There's limitations, and that the tangle of the mind is such that it needs other qualities of practice, which ultimately means how we live. And that there are things that remain hidden even when there are classical insights that are experienced. Okay? And that those things that remain hidden can bite you. They can be problems because we live in a contorted culture that keeps supporting contortion. And even if you've, had some real deep understandings as to like fundamental things about your own mind, about the nature of the human experience, the being carried along by the boat, not only of our culture, but of your own family conditioning and life conditioning, constantly reforming those unwholesome neural networks. The path is to defuse those old habits, those old networks, and to create ways of being rooted in wisdom, in love, in compassion. So, here we are. What I'm pointing to is really what you could say is the nature of the Buddhist path. And I take my description of that from how I experience the Dhamma presented by the Buddha in the early discourses. And if there's any one teaching that is most frequently used to describe the awakening, it's something like, and she or he was liberated from the asavas, from the taints, from the intoxicants, liberated from the intoxicants by non-clinging. So those intoxicants are like the a real benchmark. And if we understand that, wow, when I'm intoxicated, like you would be on alcohol, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what's going on. My mind gets carried away. It gets flooded. That's another translation. My mind gets flooded, and I'm off in trying to get more pleasures, trying to get more recognition, trying to feel secure, trying to avoid pain, trying to this, trying to that, and I'm pushed by that to the point that awareness disappears, habit takes over, and what might have been skillful in one moment, that maybe there's some mindfulness and your morality is pretty good, you're treating people nicely. Next thing you know, you're swearing and you're, I've had these experiences myself. You're out of it. You're overtaken by desire, by frustration, by fear, by wanting. It's just the normal thing. Okay, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with that except that we create suffering for ourselves and we create suffering for others. That's the problem. So these intoxicants of being constantly pulled, the Buddha described it as being led as like by, like a bull with a ring through the nose. It's a sensitive thing. The bull has to be, kind of go in that way. This is us by sensations, by sensual pleasures and by pain, going this way, away from it or towards it all the time, like that. So when we talk about intoxication, it's like the mind is obsessed with that almost every instant. It's really humbling if perhaps some of you have had some time in meditation where you've seen this. You've seen all the little adjustments of the body, or you've seen, all the little difficulties that come up. You've seen how the obsessions that enter the mind. Oh, if only I could get more money. And money is about getting pleasure and power. It's about the sensuality, actually, underneath that. Survival, of course, is tied in with that. So you can see directly this stuff of always being led here and there, but also if you look around at the world and you look around at our culture, everything supports this. What do you think drives the success of a company like Amazon? Getting stuff that will somehow bring pleasure or make it work, and the act of getting is itself intoxicating, right? The purchase and so on. These folks know this. They may not know it from a Dhamma standpoint. They sure know it from a behavior standpoint and a monetary standpoint. So that's when the Buddha talks about relinquishment, renunciation, he's saying that is never, ever going to bring any kind of lasting happiness. You get a little hit and it's over. You folks all know this, so forgive me. But, that intoxication is never going to satisfy you, ever. It's never going to last. Little moments, yes, we acknowledge the pleasures, the gratification, and of course the danger is that you get sucked in, you stay there. And if someone gets in the way of your pleasure, well, God help them, right? That's where the anger, the hatred, killing, war, resources, war and resources, make sense, colonialism, and little nod right now to patriarchy. Why do you think men have maintained patriarchy with everything they've got? Because they get the resources. It's male-centered, right? They get the power. And they aggressively protect it. But back to our more subtle aspects of this. So there's the pleasure aspect, but there's also the becoming, the I am, the stabilizing existence in a world that is completely and always unstable. So here we are. I stop, I pause. Sense your own body, I sense my body, body, mind, here and now. Is there anything that's stable? Take a look. Constant flux of sensory input, constant flux of the mind, constant relational flux, intellectual flux. And how can any me find stability in this? By grabbing and trying to freeze it and saying, oh, here I am, here I am. And what's the main thing we grab and freeze in order to stabilize here I am? Each other. You make me exist. You see me? I see you. And we stabilize each other. Sometimes in very wholesome and beautiful ways, and sometimes we can stabilize each other in hatred. Did you hear what so-and-so, Like, yeah. And we do this in our groups, our religions. We do it in our culture, our nations. To stabilize the self, it's just writ large. God stabilizes me. The church, the temple. Now I know I exist. The army, the political party, the gender. All ways of stabilizing this body-mind experience because it's too scary, otherwise it's death, insecurity. So we're flooded whenever we have an opportunity to get something that will feed the me. Of course, we feed it. Look at me. See me. I will accomplish this. I will become this. This will be my job. This will be the thing I've made in life. My beautiful garden. My beautiful the food that I've made. The fame that I've achieved, the book I've written. We also stabilize around our kindness, our compassion. That feels good. So it's not all horrible, but it is all possibly run through with this sense of existing that then we try to protect. That's the thing. Can there be love without that protection? Of course. So, this sense of a path now, when I want to link that with insight as a kind of a way of knowing the nature of the tangle and disentangling in a very deep way. And again, with the culture and our personal circumstances constantly reforming this enormous tangle of existence, of desire, that leaves many things that are unseen because the tangles are so subtle and not necessarily released when we see something into the nature of, let's say, impermanence or suffering or not self. So that's where I'm going. So let's talk about this moment that is referred to and rightly revered of insight. So you practice sati, you cultivate sati, mindfulness, awareness. You notice moment by moment experience. Perhaps let's talk about circumstances that are very specialized, which is to say formal, individual, silent meditation. That's what I'm talking about right now, okay? So I want to talk about classical practice and classical vipassana, classical insight. So you develop mindfulness moment by moment. And we all know that, it can be a rocky road sometimes. Sometimes it gets smooth for a little while. Sometimes it's rocky again when more becomes known. The more deeply you see into the nature of body-mind, well, you can have some kind of breakthrough understanding, and then it's really just more subtle stuff that's coming up later. So that's process of purification. Not a problem, it's acknowledged. So mindfulness, knowing the sensations rising and falling, knowing the mental experience, the sensations, you might say, of the mind door, as they say. So thoughts coming and going. And as the mindfulness becomes more stable, then this coming and going, this rising and vanishing, can become clear in experience. But as long as there's a kind of a being washed along with it, if there's no stability of mind, then it's very difficult to see because there's so much noise, constant disturbance of mind states, of emotions, of thoughts, and so on. And of course the body reflects all this. And this growing, gradual process of stillness that comes in makes it possible to see more clearly, more subtle features of experience. Does this make sense to you? Like if the mind is more still, then you can know more of what's moving. Think of it as like a microscope. If the bed of the microscope is vibrating, you won't be able to see what you're trying to see. And if it becomes more still, you can see better. And if it becomes very still, then things pop into focus that cannot be seen any other way. You could go outwards with a telescope, same thing. Great efforts are made to stabilize and correct for movement of the atmosphere of the earth, and so on. So there may be a time that comes in your practice where the very fact of the body or the mind itself is apprehended as simply a perception, as more transient, empty phenomena. And it may be that such an insight helps crack some very low-level attachments to the sensory things that you've been chasing after most of your lives, to the pleasures or the desire for, let's say, accomplishment and push and all the becoming of a self that you've dedicated yourself to. You say, oh my God, look how stressful that is. And you, in a moment, a great deal can be released. And let's say now you come into your life, your regular life, you're not in formal practice now, and all the special mind states of sati and samadhi, they vanish pretty quickly. I think most of us know that. Specialized states are beautiful and they're impermanent. But the insights, it's like, wow, I can no longer really believe all the voices that my mind is shooting at me about how things are, what I should be doing, all the self-judgment, all the fear, all the desires. You see through some of that, and you really are doing some real letting go is happening because you're not fooled. You know that that's not going to generate pleasure. You see the tension, the stress in all of that. Life changes, yeah? This less driven by all of that unwholesome stuff, and your behavior changes and morality comes forward because you're a more sensitive being naturally. Kindness, care, compassion manifest because there's the space now, the letting go, and all the intoxication that was driving you towards being mean or ignoring people, being selfish. That's like, that's, something's really let go. And I hearken back now to the tangle so we can get a sense of things not letting go or reforming pretty quickly. So here we are, and we're, surrounded by the messages of the culture. We're surrounded by the people in our lives, some of whom are really good spiritual friends and aim us towards the wholesome, some of whom are like, reinforce gossip and reinforce complaint, right? So, but as that happens, those networks that weren't dissolved are strengthened further. Those that were weakened maybe take the reinforcement of complaint and gossip and desire and reform themselves. And even though the insight would still maybe be like you're not as identified with everything that comes up, the movement and the habits and the way of seeing is sustained. So now I want to hold up right next to this path of insight what the Buddha said about this problem, which is that the path is a path of effacement, of erosion of the tangles of the self, eroding the tangles of the self. And this does not just happen in a single shot. This is a whole conditioned system. Now, it may be that after, let's say, 20 years in a very protected environment of meditation, that all the structures of the self get so decimated, so diminished, that very little of that cultural imprint is held onto. There's still cultural imprint. There's still the formation of how the world is seen. And maybe any parts of the cruelty and stuff can be let go. But how many of you are living full time in not just monastic conditions, but meditating monastic conditions? I suspect, actually, none of you. I'm not. And so, we have to face this reality of the whole of the path, not just a whole life path, but this understanding of the dynamic of effacement. Now, I want to come to what is things that are not seen. And I took patriarchy as my example because as a white male, and with the additional challenge of being a Dhamma teacher that can evoke some respect or be a perceived position of power, like I'm constantly confronted with, what do I assume? How do I behave? Am I sensitive to power differentials built into the culture? Despite whatever insights I may have had, right? That, I give you a kind of a intellectual definition of patriarchy, but it's really the pain of separation that it creates that's really the matter. So patriarchy is male-centered, and even if you're female, you might be centering either the men in your life or centering those roles associated historically with men. Male identified, like all certain qualities like courage and strength are identified as manly qualities, and the most courageous people I know are typically women, honestly. And the male identified, male centered, and obsessed with control, diminished in relational quality. So I just point to these things and say, okay, those are all just thoughts. But each of us have internalized some of that just by the culture we live in, just as we've assimilated some degree of racism and some degree of selfishness. There's so many things that are just built in to the fibers of the mind. And I ask you then, how does your Buddhist path contribute to the disempowering, to the defusing of these habits of ignorance? Patriarchy is a form of ignorance. Racism is a form of ignorance. Homophobia is a form of ignorance. And that the insight aspect that cuts down really can loosen things up. Let me give you an analogy. In my area, we have a plant called Canada thistle. It's a nasty plant. You just brush up against it and it hurts like crazy. It deposits like an acid on your skin. You just have to touch it. And it's also very persistent, just like patriarchy and racism. So you can pull it out with gloves and be careful. You can cut it, but underneath all those tangled roots, it's like a big family under there. Let's send some more up. They've just cut them, And so you know what you have to do? You can't just have the insight experience of pulling a plant all the way out by the roots. That won't do it. You have to have the effacement path, the Dhamma path for the Canada thistle, which in the case of the Canada thistle is you wait till it's just about to bloom its flowers and you just cut off the flowers. And they grow in big patches because they have the shared root system, right? The tangle that we're talking about. So you cut off the flowers, and what are they going to do? They're going to flower again. You cut the flowers again, and you keep doing that, and it weakens it. Next year, of course, winter, it dies back. Whew. Spring comes. There they are again. you do the same, and again, and again. And gradually, you're draining the nutrients, because they have to give the most nutrients to the flowers, right? I mean, that's their big shot. So, because they make seeds that then blow all over and spread it like crazy. So you keep doing that. Over time, that tangle underneath the soil is being drained of its power, if you will. And gradually, you can complete the effacement process of your Canada thistle. We all have our Canada thistle. We all have our patriarchy internalized, not just men, the women as well. We all have our racism internalized. We all have our greed internalized and supported by the wonderful reigns of, as I said, the way Amazon or the fashion industry or the food industry and all the fancy restaurants are all fostering that kind of sensory greed. And what is the nature of Facebook? It's all about self and existence and I am, see me, and stabilizing the self. So we've got Facebook, Instagram, and all of the rest of it that are providing plenty of nutrients for these tangled root systems of desire, fear, longing, hatred. And this is the location of our practice. Do you understand? We're not practicing just on a cushion. The mind is constantly forming and reforming, and this is where the work is done. The deep work is essential. The whole path of effacement is essential. We can help ourselves by understanding and taking encouragement. Understanding that deep insight is needed, and there's much that we still hang on to. We change our lifestyle, we change how we are. We practice Dhamma 24/7 all the time, is the extent that we're able, right? Well, you do your best. But you do your best. and that's our, what the Buddha called gradual practice, gradual progress. Very beautiful, very beautiful. Very realistic, very hopeful. Because the alternative is to constantly remain tangled. And the vision, the third noble truth, the vision of freedom, that's not necessary, that is radical. So, the old white male who's been offering these words is going to stop now and see what kind of questions there might be or reflections. I was asked to recall that this platform is supported by those who, attend and benefit. So any dana offered, most of it goes to the platform, some goes to the teacher. And also, because I often forget to say these things, you can find more teachings at the Insight Dialogue community, so insightdialogue.org. There's some at gregorykramer.org. And let's see where we go next together. Thank you. So any questions or what have you, and I'm hoping Is there a separate question and answer place, or no? I guess it's just the chat, right? Okay. Or you can speak up. You can raise your hand and be called on. Oh, Deborah Lynn. Go ahead and unmute and we'll be together in that way.
I unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you so much. Now, this may be a very basic question about my meditation practice. So, what I have noticed lately is that and this is actually painful, that I have a really hard time. I feel as though I'm beginning to really notice how disconnected I am from my body.
Right.
And I think I need a little guidance. And
Yeah. You know,
I do have a formal practice, but I feel like I'm not in my body, that I'm maybe afraid.
there's a wisdom in that. Don't not listen to it. Okay? Don't push yourself. It's very beautiful that you see that this is an issue. That's really I mean, have you not lived most of your life with the same issue but not knowing it? Just like the rest of us, you know?
Yeah.
So that's a really, really wholesome, strong place for you now. So remember that. Take confidence in that. And where there's fear, acknowledge the fear. Don't judge the fear, because it's there for a reason, you know. Maybe being in the body wasn't safe and so on. So, you know, be kind to yourself. And if you find yourself comfortable with simple body things, like the stepping of the feet on the floor as you walk, right? It may not be suitable for you to go right, let's say, to the breath or to the belly or to the heart or something. That may not be the right way. But maybe there's some other embodiment type practice that has more movement and less stillness. Right? So maybe your way in is through, let's say, yoga or Tai Chi or just walking meditation. And also, if you can, if conditions allow, spend some time in nature and open to the nature around you to the extent that it feels comfortable and safe and interesting. Let it be interesting. And you open in nature, and then just kind of use your mind to reflect, I too am nature. I am part of nature. I'm not just a separate thing from nature. This is nature. You're an animal. We all are. But to feel that when you're with the trees, when you're with the grasses and the bushes, to feel that, and then the body becomes just nature, right? And it's not just this human, tangled, contorted thing that our lives make of it. The contortion all comes from the process of accumulating notions, images, emotional experiences that then all kind of function together to create this sense of me and I and you and not safe and alone and with, you know, all of that. But in nature, there's something simpler. In just the footstep on the floor, there's something simpler. So, you know, you're in a really good place, a really good beginning place. So I hope you feel some joy in that.
I think I'll shift more to walking meditation.
Mm-hmm. Good, good. And the quality of mindfulness developed in walking, one of the things the Buddha said about it, that mindfulness lasts a long time. It's more robust, it's very adaptable. And then whenever there's times of stillness that you feel naturally drawn to, go for it. And and don't, no need to force it.
Yes. Thank you for reminding me to be gentle.
Mm,
Yes. That was quite helpful. I'm grateful. Thank you so much.
you bet.
There are two things in the chat. Would you like me to read them?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks a lot. Because I'm not reading it. Yeah, I'm looking at humans.
Yeah. Peg Evans Brown said, I appreciate the image of thistle and not uprooting. The uprooting idea seems quite difficult at times as a struggling yogi. Snipping continually seems more accessible to me.
Mm, 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 mm. Beautiful. Yeah. Sometimes uprooting's okay for some people at the right time. At the wrong time, it's damaging. Meditation centers at the beginning didn't know this, and there was harm that was created. For some people got a great deal of good, and some people had real trouble. So it's not either or, you know. And at the same time, the sense that it makes me really happy to hear that what landed for you is this sense of the value of that long-term clipping, because it's like every moment of our lives then is so obviously our path. It's not separate from our path. It is path, right? Every instant, because the mind is constantly forming and reforming this tangle. We can see through it, but it takes time. And so I'm glad you got that sense of it. Thank you very much.
I'm wondering if we can go back and forth a little between the chat and the hands that are coming up.
Sure.
And so, Marita, I'll bring you on. Feel free to unmute.
You're still muted, Marita. There you go. No, you're muted. We can do this. Can you unmute yourself, or can the host unmute you or something?
I can only ask her to.
Okay. There you go.
I just want to share something that occurred just the other day. I stumbled into an old talk by a man called Manly Hall. And I never heard of him before, but he described this body, mind, that I call myself, as a kind of an empire with the mind as the executive. And for me, who most of my life been struggling with anxiety and trauma and stuff like that, I've been trying to flee from my body, actually, most of the time. But with this description, to look at the body mind in a monarchical way,
Right.
I all of a sudden I've been feeling reverence to my body, to all the because he explained it like the mind is the executive and the body just has to hang around. Uh, the only option for the body is to strike. And, so all of a sudden I've been, feeling all the respect for the digestion and the heart beating and the lungs breathing, and I'm not doing anything of that.
Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to share that because all of a sudden I feel that I could actually get close to my body
Mm,
from a
beautiful.
different angle.
Thank you, Marita. Thank you very much.
Yang Chen put in the chat, during times of temptation to intoxicants, actual ones such as alcohol, for example, what might we do in the moment when we recognize the desire to escape? Meditation, one obvious example, but how might we apply the Dharma when we can't sit?
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, definitely. Well, in the midst of life, when stuff comes up, because it might be an intoxicant that's leading to anger. It might be an intoxicant that's leading to, some kind of other unwholesome thing other than alcohol. But alcohol is a good example because it's like, you're going to go for a drink, and the mind knows, oh, there's issues here. But to think that, oh, formal meditation right then is going to be an answer. I don't, I would not even really have that on the list for right then, because meditation is going to shift the whole level of attachment and getting lost in intoxicants. But in the moment, there's other strategies, right? And one of them, of course, is obviously you reflect. You say mindfulness has to come up. Without mindfulness, habit will grab you. You'll carry it out. Boom. End of story. No mindfulness, no freedom at all. But with mindfulness, one approach is like you think cause and effect. If I do this, if I well, let's take another kind of intoxicant like anger. If I scream at this person, if I yell at this person, then what's going to happen? Well, I of course, will upset them. They might scream back at me. We might get into a fight. I recognize if I fall into this anger or take this drink that I'm reinforcing the negative habits, all the things that the mind can do in that moment. And sometimes that'll be enough. It's like, okay, I'm not going to go there. I see, I've had a time to reflect. This is not going to be good. I'm not going to take this drug. I'm not going to go to that event or that, I'm not going to pull the trigger on my gun. If to take it real extreme, think. But also, this really points to the importance of practice, of having frameworks, of having like a sense that your life is an ongoing practice, and that moral decisions are there not just to make for less harm for the world, but they're also to make less harm for you, and that your commitment to that is significant. So how can you reinforce that sense of commitment? How can the energy be there to meet the energy of release, the energy of what's wholesome? How can it be there to meet that energy of, I want that, I want to go there, I want that escape? So once again, we come to this, it's a little bit of a paradox. A practice that is abiding, that is part of your life, can then be there to support you. But in that moment, if you don't have that practice, then you can get tangled. So how do you get started? You see? How do you get going on that? And that's where both the formal practices will help and how you arrange your life, choosing your friends. The power of spiritual friendship is so great that the Buddha said it's the whole of the holy life. It's the whole thing, he said. So why? Well, because if you have people who are going to offer you that liquor, or if you put yourself in situations where anger is constantly reverberating in your, social media feeds or anywhere else, then you're going to be reinforcing that, and it's going to get worse. If you have contacts, spiritual friendships, social engagements that actually support the wholesome of loving kindness, of compassion, of relinquishment, all the things we're talking about, then that will have some chance over time. The conditions will be right for that letting go, because you may want the drink this time, but if you keep with the wholesome friendships, if you keep with formal practices, with a life of mindfulness and reflection, right? Use the power of the intellect. It's huge. Use the power of love, of spiritual friendship. It's huge. And you need it in the face of the tangles, in the face of the intoxicants. So, of course, the traditional advice of guarding the senses, that's very Buddhist language, is great advice. Try not to put yourself in that circumstance. Don't have the liquor around, or don't go to the places where either there's liquor or where there's political insanity or, whatever other difficulties you might be facing. So once again, you see the relationship of formal and all life practice, I hope. A good question.
We have 3 people with their hand up and a lot going on in the chat, so we'll do our best here. I'm going to bring on Victoria.
Hi, Gregory.
Hi.
Wonderful to see you again. I haven't seen you since Insight Dialogue retreat. I don't know when it was, but it was life-changing. That's all I can say. And I'm really grateful for your work. There's probably not time because so many people want to share with you, which is understandable. I wish we had more time, but I am having a lot of sort of papancha, I guess you would call it, about this whole, since you brought up the patriarchy and even put it in your title for today, I feel like our culture and our society is moving into even more divisive. It's like it's ever more divisive and sort of populating, to use the term from the internet or whatever. And I'm wondering to what degree I'm wondering how we can bring a more kind of non-dual awareness into all of these dialogues in terms of like patriarchy, racism. I think it's sort of like that Canadian plant that these things are so entrenched in our culture, and it's true that we need to expose them. But I feel like in many ways, I just wanted your comments on this, that now, of course, it's an endless work, but now we have exposed sort of the evils that have infested the soil of our society, of our world. And I'm wondering how now we can open out more into a kind of where we recognize that each of us is unique and different. And so, because something really touched my heart it hurt me viscerally when I saw the title of today's Sunday Sangha, because I thought, and I've heard you say this before, that it's almost like you're, and you said, I beg for your forgiveness in advance, which is really beautiful. But at the same time, my heart went out to you and I thought, It's okay. It's okay, Gregory. Like you were born this way. You look like this. You have this background. You have this family. You know, and embrace it and love it and celebrate it. You know, in as you, apart from all these other things that are indeed present and evil, and people take advantage of them, and there is abuse, and there is, you know, there is this dark side. But I don't know, I felt for you, and I just couldn't resist putting up my hand just to say, you know, we love you as you are. And just, I don't know what, I just wanted to hear your comments on, like, because sometimes I want people, like, I had a friend who was a very, very famous artist who said, I don't want to be a woman artist, I want to be an artist. So anyway, thank you.
Well, if she's a woman artist, that will be also remembered because of the way our culture is.
Right.
And I understand that desire, and I appreciate your compassion. Of course, you know, the so-called oppressor, or the one who has the privilege and power, isn't only one of the people suffering from that privilege, and but it is a place of suffering for the men who are stuck with the burden of patriarchy, who are suffering under patriarchy, and it's good to recognize that, just as men should recognize how women are suffering under patriarchy. It's good for women to know that men suffer under it terribly. It's not just privilege. There's a lot of oppression there, cutting off of emotions, cutting off of relatedness, taking on hardness that the culture seems to push. So thank you for that. Flora?
Hi there.
Hi.
I put my hand up a little while ago when I had an impulse to respond to the thistle metaphor, and I feel like I might start mixing my metaphors now.
Yeah.
But to go with the proverbial thistles, I found, and the title about what's hidden, and then how we can become aware of what's hidden. I just had like this sort of whim about what do we do with the thistle heads? And I'm not even sure I fully understood what these thistles are, but maybe that's sort of for each of us to decide, or maybe it's just the different manifestations of patriarchy, and right down to the historical gender binary myth that we are that we've internalized. But yeah, I suppose I'll just share. I loved the suggestion of the walking meditation and being in nature, and to be more literal with my extended metaphor. Yeah, it's like maybe we could, for ourselves and our own path or healing, I've found it quite powerful when I've externalized problems, either in drawings or taking something physical that's been winking at me and somehow feels psychically representative of a thing, and then doing some kind of ritual with it, which feels kind of witchy and a nice strategy for being countercultural in terms of the patriarchal sort of linear, and being more intuitive with like taking that object or doing that drawing with your eyes closed or whatever it might be, and finding some kind of insight in that way, or comfort. So yeah, this doesn't feel very not sure what the Buddha would say about it. Maybe he'd be like, yeah, that's my kind of Buddhism, like Thich Nhat Hanh. But yeah, just wanted to offer something.
I appreciate that.
Sideways.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's so many whole strategies for increasing the wholesome and decreasing the unwholesome. And I'm glad you brought up a whole other family of strategies. That's great. I think the last, Steve, if you can be brief, it's really just about closing time. But I know you've been hanging out there for a while.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. I just want to thank you very much for that talk. It was wonderful. I just want to talk about one thing really quickly that you mentioned that I hadn't really thought about before, and that is the whole concept of building identity around loving kindness and how, and correct me if I misinterpreted what you said, but the whole concept of building like self and identity around being a loving, kind person is sort of an unnecessary step in the sense that you're creating a self that needs to be defended or protected. If instead you were to look out and recognize that the whole infinite energy field of loving kindness is something that we can tap into with awareness and mindfulness. And in that way, we become kind of a conduit to channel that loving kindness that exists out there in the energy field, become a channel for that to transmit that into the world. We don't need to build this identity around it. Is that kind of what you were saying?
Well, I'm usually very careful about trying to state that things exist out there as such, whether it's loving kindness or self or the true nature or Buddha nature or God or anything. Because the mind so quickly clings, right? And I'm not saying you're implying that, and I'm not saying I'm right or there's a right or wrong here. I'm just very careful, kind of like the Buddha was very careful about saying, I'm not trying to talk about all these certain kinds of questions. There were a bunch of questions like whether Buddha exists or not after death, whether there's the body comes first or the mind, like the big questions in neuroscience. It's sort of like what helps with suffering and not, and the end of suffering. So I'm very practical in that sense of immediate experience. Now, the imagery that you provide can be very, very helpful for certain people to say, I feel it out there, I'm moving it through me. And the sense, and I feel that when I'm in nature, for example. And I certainly feel the vibrating quality of loving kindness and compassion as a systemic thing. So I'm not limiting this to a sense of internal self or anything like that. But I'm also not then saying there's any such thing that exists in a stable, existent way. It's all flux, it's all change. And but what I'm appreciating in what you're saying, Steve, and I'll close with this just for time, is to the extent that we can be inspired by a sense of love coming through us from out there, then take that inspiration. And to the extent that you find the mind fixating or saying, why can't I get it now? Or anything like that, then just notice that that's what the mind's doing and that there's no inherent truth to that. It's just a fabricating of experience. So that would be my perhaps very limited answer, or reply rather. Yeah. So thank you. Yeah. And just want to take the last moment in closing to once again say that we're all on this path together, and we recognize in our own experience where there's tenderness, sensitivity. We are very sensitive beings with our eyes and our ears and our minds, our hearts. And so we know that others are. And the world is so wrought with suffering. And let's know that whatever we do here that's good, we can wish that this is in support of everyone's well-being, our own and others, to recognize the potential of even moments of compassion, moments of care. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be at peace. May there be peace. May there be peace. May there be peace. And thank you, friends, and thank you to Sangha Live and my wonderful host. And again, if you want to see more, go to insightdialogue.org or gregorykramer.org. And may your life path be excellent. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Gregory, for your teaching.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Grazie.
you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yes, and gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gregory. It was amazing.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you very much, Gregory.
Thank you, Gregory, and everybody.
Thank you.
If people had their questions, we can always engage together in the Sangha Live Connect and explore our inquiries together further. Also, maybe at the replay, when this video becomes available at the replay, we can bring questions there too. So we did our best, and thank you so much, Sangha, for being part of today. Blessings.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Marnie.